It's to raise awareness of the lack of senior female financial leadership in the region. It's to create a support network so that as a group we can support each other to achieve our professional aspirations. And it's to ensure that the opportunities are there, that as individuals are ready, that they can take them. I think it's also about raising awareness across organisations as well, in terms of chief executives and boards and the value of diversity in senior leadership. So I'm also very aware that as we talk through the issues today, we won't have all the answers, but that it's more about us having the time to talk through issues, to hear from personal experiences of others, and to support each other with a safe space to discuss that will get us forward, will move us forward, and will answer and will change some of the stats that we talk about in a minute. So in terms of timing, I don't think there's any better timing to set this network up. We've all been working really hard in terms of our response to the COVID incident. And as part of that, we've seen ourselves, we've seen each other, and we've seen our teams stepping up, taking on additional responsibilities and becoming much more adaptable. And I think it's an opportunity to build on this and to build on the increased networks that we've achieved as part of that. So I'm really hoping that that's what everyone is here and has joined us today to hear about, to do, and to be part of and to input into. So in terms of the structure of the next 55 minutes or so, we're fortunate enough to have a panel. Here are the people that you can see on the screen. Many of you will know all of us, and I will let them introduce themselves in a moment. But the panel will be sharing their views on what has worked for them and what barriers they've faced in becoming a director of finance. And I'd also like to say that I would like this to be as informal as possible. And also for it to be a safe space for everyone to raise questions that they have, for anyone to ask any of the panel members or each other anything that they would like to, and also to add comments and feedback as we talk through the issues. If I could ask you all to use the comments, the chat box to ask those questions. So I think some of you will have heard Nicola say earlier, everyone's on mute at the moment, and if you could raise questions through the chat box, that would be really helpful. Thank you very much for that. So I won't spend any more time talking. I'm going to hand over to Nicola, who is my co-host for today and has been absolutely integral in terms of organising the webinar today, and who I know has already been in contact with a lot of you. So Nicola.
Thank you, thanks Zoe. So glad so many of you could make it, and thank you for downloading Zoom and in fact, I've been overwhelmed by the positive response that I've had whilst I've reached out to everyone over the last few weeks. So I'm Nicola Brooks. I run the financial recruitment team at Interim Professionals and Executive Professionals. I've been recruiting finance people into the NHS for more than 20 years. Seems like a very long time. And during that time, I've taken a very keen interest in diversity, and in particular, promoting diversity female leaders up to board level. I became very involved with this in the London region when Jeff Buggle was the finance director there, and helped set up a female leaders network there. Back in the day when you used to be able to meet in pubs and bars and things like that. So now we can't do this at the moment. We have to meet online instead. And yeah, so Jeff recently introduced me to Zoe, and here we are running the first one of this kind in the east of England. So it made sense actually to partner up with a recruitment company to do this, not just to use our networks and our reach, but also because a recruitment consultancy often has a unique position to be able to influence going wider and recruiting from a very broad pool. And that's, I think, one of the ways where we can help what we're here to talk about today. But anyway, enough about me. I'd like to welcome our two speakers today, Caroline Owusu-Benowa and Don Scraffield. And I wondered if you'd be able to give a brief introduction about yourself. Perhaps if we start with Don.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. So welcome everyone, and thanks ever so much for taking the time. Sorry that I was a little bit close to the wires joining you all. Unfortunately, I had a few technical issues. So many of you will probably know me. I've been fortunate to work in the patch now for nearly 24 years in the NHS, which is a bit scary when I think about it. Working obviously in providers, but also in the majority in commissioning for the first 18 years of my career. So I'm very happy to talk to you about my experiences and provide some views and support.
Caroline?
Yes, I'm Caroline Owusu-Benwa. I'm CFO at Royal National Orthopaedic Hospital. It's a London orthopaedic hospital. I became CFO in March this year. So I'm a very new CFO, joined right in the middle of the pandemic. Crazy time to start a new role as a CFO. But I must say that the journey thus far has been really interesting, and it's been lovely to see the collaboration across the systems. I also sit on the London Talent and Diversity Board, where we are doing a lot of work around promoting diversity in finance and in the senior team in finance, because of the wide disparity we have between lower level NHS finance jobs, roles in finance. And you see that the lower bands are quite diverse. The more senior you get, the less diverse it is. And I'm involved with some work around recruitment and different aspects of that program. So lovely to come and be invited to be a part of this. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Good, you're welcome. Before we kick off with some questions for the panel, just some what I thought was quite worrying stats about the region. So the East of England region, as we know, is vast. It's a huge area, yet it's significantly lacking in female leadership and female leaders. So in CCGs, I think we have 4 female CFOs. I think they're all on the chat today. Jane, Maria, Elke and Dee. In the centre in NHSI&E, we have 2 women at VSM level, so Zoe and Vicky, and the 22 provider trusts across the region. We only have 1 CFO who is on. So our first question, quite naturally, I think we should address to Dawn, which is just to sort of start off the discussion really. Why do you think we have so few female CFOs in the region?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good question, because I've been fortunate to work with many female leaders, but I think the challenge really is when you look at the succession planning and when you look at the arrangements across the region around flexibility perhaps of working patterns. I mean, you know, a good thing that has come of COVID obviously is the increased use of technology, so it does make being able to provide some of these leadership roles a lot more accessible perhaps for people trying to juggle home life as well as work life. I think the hours are very long, and I think sometimes people are put off perhaps a little bit by that. But also when you look at the pipeline of deputies and you look at the number of perhaps long-standing CFOs in the area, obviously predominantly male, there isn't a fast turnover and a change, and I think some of the recent changes perhaps have enabled some of that opportunity. So Colchester, when I joined Colchester, it wasn't perhaps a hugely attractive place because it had a huge amount of challenges at the point I joined in February 2015, and I think I was keen to kind of get involved and really kind of make a difference with some of those challenges. I think as well it depends on people's circumstances, so I've been really fortunate to have a great support network. You know, my mum has helped to look after my daughters as they've grown up, but also the people that have supported me throughout my career. I've been very fortunate to have people that have championed me, and I think that's hugely helped and supported me in the role that, you know, that I've done. So I think there's some factors really, pipeline and those kind of circumstances around individuals. I think we've probably got to think about how we can expand those opportunities, very much as Caroline said. You know, when you look at the diversity and also the way in which we support people to do some of these roles, I really think we need to change how we can increase the opportunities for people, recognising that we're not all in a place that we can just, park our home life and forget about it for, quite long periods of time. So how do we make the roles more flexible?
So before we sort of delve into some of those issues in detail, I'm quite interested to see how that picture compares with Caroline's experience of London, for example. And because, some of the things you touched on there, Dawn, are key. If there's very low turnover in that area, then it stands to reason that there are fewer opportunities. But what's your experience been, Caroline?
I think everything that Dawn says resonates with me, and having a support network is sometimes key. And women traditionally, women like to see everything organized in a certain way before they make the move. It's just the way we're wired. I would want to, if I'm going for a job, I think about childcare. I think about so many things that probably a male candidate wouldn't think about. So that definitely resonates with me. And I think one of the things you said there, Dawn, that really struck a chord with me is having people in your life who help. It's about a network around you. And I'm not talking just home network. Home network is important, but even more important is the work network. So when I was on the NHS graduate management scheme, and I've seen Cynthia Conquest on here, because I remember meeting Cynthia when I was fresh out of the grad scheme years ago. I had a mentor, and he was white, middle class, but one of the most diverse people you'd ever meet, David Ragg, cheering me on, supporting me, guiding me on what roles to go for. And now I look back and I remember storming out of his office in tears one day because I'd seen this job. It was the perfect job in my mind. And I went to show it to him, and he said to me, "That's the job you do when you're about a year or two from retiring. That's not the job you do when you're young and you're building your career." And he was quite brutal in his feedback. But then now I look back and I say, thank God for the person he was to me. It helped toughen me up. It helped me to go for the right opportunities. So having that support network is important. And I was fortunate enough that later in life, I then met Anne Johnson, who became my sponsor, and she's also helped guide me. I think that as females, one of the things we probably sometimes struggle to do is the networking piece. But the more I've grown in my career, the more I've seen how important it is and how we need to make the time and the space for it. The pattern in London is not very dissimilar to the southeast. It isn't. We have very few female finance directors. I think last count, I did the count with Nicola, there's about eight of us. There's about 45 organizations. So perhaps slightly better on balance than the east of England, but it's no different to what it is. And some of the things that also hold us back, well, certainly for me, is when you see a role, you want to make sure that you can fulfill 100% of the JD before you put yourself forward. And somebody said to me, if you can do 100%, that means that role is not for you, because you can already do the job. There has to be a learning curve in every role, right? But I personally, I don't think like that. I just think I go through the spec and I tick, can I do that? Can I do that? If I can't do anything, it puts me off from going for that role. And I think it's a very, very different mindset, because what employers are looking for is perhaps somebody who can do 70% of the role and probably learn the other 30%.
Well, let's. There's some good questions coming through on the chat. Actually, I have made a note of them as well. But one that's just come up is exactly what you were just saying. So perhaps what is it that's different about women and why finance? So there across the region there are a number of board level roles that I think women are in particular HR chief exec and also nursing medical directors. But what is it specifically about finance that means that there's fewer women, and particularly in the East, make it to CFO level? Thanks for the question, Sophie, it's a great one. When there are lots of female stakeholders in the NHS to look outside of our professional home, is there something about not seeing many female CFOs which mean that young women can't visualise their future, or leadership in the profession, or when they look up, there aren't that many examples of themselves? Does anyone want to comment on that?
Yeah, happy to start on that one. I do think when you look perhaps at the way in which there's so much more conscious about the diversity of our boards, and I think if you look at young people and the encouragement around the sciences and maths and that kind of diversity and equality, I think there is probably less stigma or kind of that, male, female kind of gender expected training. If I think about, when I first started my career, I became a nursery nurse before I became an accountant, which obviously is a little bit of a diverse kind of switch over. I think now there is much more kind of promotion, certainly at student level, around some of the equality. When you think about some of the roles, for example, nursing, there is a lot more male nursing that's also encouraged, at younger age. And I think there's something about that kind of gender equity that is different. I also think the other thing that's changed quite considerably, when I think back to my professional qualification, I had to do all three of my exams for each sitting and pass all three. I did ACCA, and if I failed any at that point, then I had to retake within a margin them all. And obviously what's happened with professional qualifications like that is they've looked at the way in which they appeal to people that want to become qualified, to make it more accessible. The fact that there's a lot more accessible online, I had to travel to London to, and it's that time commitment as well as flexibility in being able to juggle that, basically. So I think those factors do make it slightly different. And then of course you go into these careers for longevity, so it's about then, identifying the talent and also helping people on that career journey so that it's not just the same people that are circulating, so that we get a richness that comes into the systems that we work in with opportunities, so that people start to get their names known and start to be able to support on, pieces of work that involve more than just perhaps the normal group of people that circulate. So just a couple of thoughts, really.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really clear that having a network and a support network, both personally and professionally, has been incredibly beneficial. And there are quite a few questions coming through about how beneficial it's been and how to establish those kind of networks. And Caroline, you talked about your mentor. And so how would you go about getting a mentor or a champion? And I guess my other question around that would be, how does it matter whether that individual is female or male?
I have found that it didn't matter. If you met David Ragg, if you knew him, you would see he's white, middle-class male. He's nothing like what somebody like me probably would look at. And I remember when I was, on the grad scheme, you're required to have a mentor. There's somebody else I chose. And somebody was my placement manager at the time who said to me, this person you've chosen is really good and you probably get on with him, and I think you should establish that network. But for a mentor, I think David will be better. And I didn't understand what he meant by, how do you decide between two people which one is better? Because at that time, I didn't know what his values were. I didn't know anything about the man. My very first meeting with him was very, very awkward. and somebody's just put in the chat, David Ragg is very forward thinking and it didn't matter that he was a male. I don't think it matters at all. What matters is whether the person's values are similar to yours. The person is going to provide an objective soundboard that you can use to test out your ideas. The person is going to champion you in a way that will help build you up and support you. So what David did for me was creating me that confidence and help me to explore some of my own personal issues, some of which is more cultural rather than me being a female, I think. So if I'm in a meeting, for example, I have this problem where in my culture it's quite rude to just interject. So you would wait for a space, and sometimes that space never comes. So that means that the good ideas that you have, you never really get an opportunity to put it forward. And I started working with him on some of those things. I think it doesn't really matter the sex. It's just more about whether that person shares your values. And you have to be careful as well. There are people who talk a good talk about values, but when you actually test it out with them, that's not what they practice. And it's insane that it was just, I mean, he was my mentor since 2007 for about 7 or 8 years. And it was only last year that I found out he provided the same support to another female colleague who is also a CFO. I had no idea. We went for a conference and she spoke about him and I was like, oh my God, do you know what I mean? So he's got that value base that I needed at the time. That's it. Anne Johnson is female, so she's come at it from a slightly different perspective in terms of mentoring, because in a sense, she sees things from my perspective. Whereas David will probably ask the question, why are you thinking they're thinking that way? And probably will understand it more. So if you had a female mentor, they probably identify with some of your fears better. That's what I found recently. But at the time I had David, I didn't know that I was missing anything.
That's really helpful, thank you. And Dawn, how would you go about finding a mentor?
Yeah, so I think that's a good question, because I think mentor and kind of someone that ambassadors for you. So my kind of experience is people that you hear or get support and praise because they believe in you and stretch you, and kind of, you know, in that uncomfortable zone where, I mean, you know, many female leaders kind of experience that imposter syndrome feeling, and actually having people that say to you, actually, you know, that was really good, or, you know, what you're thinking there is a really good idea about how you thought about, or actually, you know, one of the projects that I was given was a care of the elderly project, which obviously at the time I thought, well, I'm an accountant, what on earth can I do to lead such a big program that's so diverse with so many different stakeholders? And it's that people that give you that confidence, because they believe that you know, as Caroline says, you've got the values, you have some shared values, but they have the belief in you, which gives you the confidence to kind of do something and take a risk with you, which I think is something, because generally perhaps female leaders are perhaps considered maybe a little bit less, you know, risky, and won't kind of take so many risks maybe as the profile, then actually finding someone that you feel, you know, actually is supporting you and championing you. And then in a way, it doesn't have to be a formal relationship. I mean, obviously Caroline's talked through about the program that she came through. So I do have a coach, which, you know, I've been involved with other programs and stuff before, and I think it is helpful to formally get a coach through some networks, some of the aspiring directors networks, or some of the you know, Health Education England programs. But it's more than that. I feel it's actually having people, as you know, as people said, that network in the work environment, where people say, oh, well, actually, have you thought about asking Dawn, or have you, Dawn could do that, and actually before you know it, you've got people that are then encouraging you to be part of something which you never anticipated that you could do. So it's watching out, I think, for those opportunities and really just grabbing them, and seeing where it goes, really.
And I guess it's about us as a network sharing them as we know about them, which would be crucial. Thank you.
So some other questions have come through. To read this one out. What do you think the current senior managers within the NHS or wider public sector can do to encourage and inspire younger female women to work towards senior roles besides mentoring and coaching? What kind of initiatives are there available for us to participate? Someone else had put previously about the talent pool was about to start, so presumably the talent pool is quite a positive initiative already in place that's been paused momentarily because of COVID, but hopefully that'll pick up again. But what else are the panel aware of that could help the aspiring leaders coming through?
Aside from, should I go first? Aside from formal coaching and mentoring, before I came on this call, I started reflecting a little bit about my career. And what I've noticed is, what I've realized is, I've had really some really good people who I've come across. And when you establish those relationships, it's about keeping those relationships going. It's not just, as Dawn intimated earlier, it's not just about the formal mentoring and all of that. It's also about the informal networks and learning from these people and then actually putting yourself out there. If there is a project, I will get involved in it, and it doesn't matter that it's got nothing to do with what I'm doing. It's the learning that I'm going to take from it that I'm looking at all the time, and possibly getting people to give you that opportunity. I mean, in one of my roles, I had nothing to do with CIPs, and yet I spent almost half of my year just doing CIPs. It's got nothing to do with my role, absolutely outside my remit. And I did it because the finance director said, will you be willing to take this on? And she didn't actually ask. We're having a conversation and she was thinking about it. And I said, actually, we can share it between us. I'll do a bit, you do a bit, and let's see how we get on. And it stretched me to the limits because, first of all, I mean, CIPs is something that I had said in my career that I'd never do. And then there I was, by putting myself forward, I could hear it, my voice in my head say, what are you doing, Caroline? Just be quiet. That's what they need. It doesn't mean you should do it. It's putting yourself out there and doing things. So you might find that in doing things like that, you discover things about yourself that you probably didn't know. And it also gives you that competitive edge when you go to put yourself out there to get the next role, because you haven't just done what, you're not a traditional management accountant, but you're a management accountant who's done SIPs, costing, and you've done a whole range of things that the average accountants wouldn't do. And being brave enough as women to embrace some of those, I think, helps.
Yeah. So just reflecting on that, I think when I finished my professional qualification, because I knew that I wanted to try and progress my career, I remember being really keen at the time to go on, because naturally you feel like there should be a natural pathway for you to progress. So at the time, I wanted to progress to do an MBA, and my line manager at the time, she discouraged me from doing that because she said, well, actually, it'll be better for you to get some more experience. And at the time, I felt a little bit frustrated because I didn't know how was I going to progress, because it felt like I needed to have that kind of, academic structure, because otherwise how was I going to develop? But actually, I was pleased that was the advice that I was given, because then what it encouraged me to do is then try and look for that those opportunities to learn and to do stuff that wasn't perhaps in my normal job. And then later on in life, when I did do my MBA, I actually was able to do it, I feel, much more justice than I ever would have been able to do it, because I had got those experiences and I had those reference points. And also, as Caroline said, it gave me opportunities to kind of sell myself in a different way, because I'd done stuff that wasn't part of the normal expected role. And I think that's the thing that then makes you stand out for people then to champion you and to want to support you, because you're kind of keen to do, go outside of your kind of, I won't even say comfort zone, because none of us, I certainly, is not a good feeling to go outside my comfort zone, because actually, as Caroline said, you think, what am I doing? But then you find yourself in a situation and you think, actually, I really want to do the right thing here. If we've got some system challenges in the area that I'm working in, and you think, my goodness me, some of the conversations that we're having at the moment are really challenging, but actually, it's for the right reasons that you're trying to pursue an avenue, and you just rely on the people around you to hope that you get that support. And yeah, so I think it's not necessarily just always a clear path, it's sometimes what you least expect. And that's the kind of things you should look out for.
So some really good answers there. I like the experiences you've drawn on there, and a lot of the examples you've given are things that you can do, or that that we can do, or anyone that's watching this today can do to help themselves. In terms of taking on challenges, gaining experience that you can then draw on, which then makes you a worthy person for someone else to want to champion. And also, some of those examples, Caroline, I remember in your the interview for the RNOH job did come out as well. So it then puts you in that position. Everything leads to that, to you being there. If we can sort of flip it slightly, and if I can ask, what about the situations out with your control that determine or that influence whether who gets promoted or who advances up the chain in the NHS? So what can we do to, what is outside your control? And by that I mean things like board perception of how a CFO is or should be. If we can ask the panel what their feelings are around that. There's a lot of things you can control, but what can you do about the things that you can't?
Good question.
That's a challenging question, but let me have a start. I think I've always thought about it this way, that there are things that are outside my control and there's nothing I can do about it. Sometimes there is nothing that you can do. But I know that I can use the things that are within my control to influence the things that are outside my control. So, for example, when I get into an organization, the first thing I want to do is to work hard, create the right networks, get to know the business, try my best to actually get to know the organization. And as a result of that, every single organization I've worked for, I actually deeply care about and love, and I speak of very fondly, because I go into a place not focusing on the negatives, but focusing on the positives. What can I gain from this place? When I was at BHR, we had about 5 directors of finance in the 5 years that I was there. And whilst my colleagues spent their time talking about how terrible it was, I spent my time saying, we've got a new director. I wonder what he can teach me. What has he got to bring that will help enhance my career? I cannot influence how a panel that's full of male middle-class men will choose, but I can certainly influence how my work output will help people to see the value that I bring to an organization. I think that increasingly, though, boards are looking to be more diverse. The appetite is out there. People are starting to think, hang on a minute, women bring a whole new perspective to conversations. We see things very differently for men. I see it in my own home. I've got a husband and a son, and I can see that they see things very differently from me. I see it in my work colleagues, and I remember one of my work colleagues said, "Oh, here she comes, Caroline's coming. Everything we've agreed, she's probably going to say doesn't make sense or something. She's going to say something that would throw a spanner in the works." We've got this natural ability to look at things very, very differently. And I don't know whether it's because of the role, the nurturing we have. I don't know what it is, but you have something very unique. And I believe every individual does. So it's how you use the uniqueness you've got and the things that are within your control to influence people above you so that you get noticed. You get, Nicola, you know what I went through to try and extract myself from Lewisham, so that the people above you see that you matter. And that's when you start to make progress. And I think as you know, the diversity agenda is promoted, boards will start looking out for these very good individuals who they can bring up. And we as, I suppose, myself, Dawn, Zoe, as senior leaders in the NHS, have to find a way to give something back. Nurture a person like yourself that you can actually nurture and develop and support to see grow. I think that's how that's my perspective.
And Dawn, anything that you can add to that as well? Because I think, you know, no matter how hard we try, and there is the culture of people will tend to even subconsciously recruit in their own image. And if their own image is something that's different to what we're representing, how can we influence that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I definitely would encourage people to be themselves, because actually we spend a lot of time at work, and to do anything other than be yourself, I think you lose yourself in that. And actually that's quite difficult to have a long and happy career if you can't be yourself. And I think the other thing that I would say is, you know, don't be bitter or angry, or kind of don't let it frustrate you about the people you work with that you don't feel fits the image of the people that you think should be in those roles. Because actually, you know, the NHS public sector is a small family, and everybody has got something to contribute. So actually, you know, they definitely don't, you know, kind of waste your energy really on trying to change something that is outside your control. However, I think as you go through your, you know, your work experiences, your career, there will always be opportunities, whether you're asked to participate in interview panels, whether you're asked to take the leadership roles in pieces of work, to deliver projects. And actually, they're the times that you have the opportunities then to make the stand and to make the point, you know, to champion those female leaders, to point out when you're on a selection panel the difference that they will bring, but, you know, accepting that sometimes that decision might not be in your hands because it is the board decision or what have you. But it's kind of making the statements that, you know, you'll leave feeling proud that actually you have made your point known and that you've been yourself in that process. And actually, you know, we all have, as accountants, we all have our, you know, professional qualifications. We're all capable of doing the job. We've all been, you know, kite marked, as it were, that we're capable. And therefore, it's how we deliver that. And the, you know, as Caroline says, the uniqueness that we all have. So be yourself, don't be angry, and take every opportunity to promote and support others that you can see around you. Yeah.
Can I just add to that? Hadav Verdi is he leads the Talent and Diversity Board in London. And he said something to me once. He said, and I can't remember what the conversation was. I was actually in a conversation with someone else. And he said, look, yes, somebody was telling me how they've experienced something so negative. And he said, look, taking the negatives with you will only stop you from being the best that you can be. So just to buttress what Dawn said, leave it all behind. The past is the past. What can we make out of the future? And, you know, The negatives is just a waste of your energy, waste of effort, waste of time, energy. The amount of time you probably spend thinking and talking about it, it's not worth it. That time could be spent creating an impression on someone who would help open the door to your next big break. So I totally agree with you there, Dawn.
A really specific question around, and we mentioned it earlier, the imposter syndrome, and whether or not it's something that you can overcome or whether it's something you have to live with. And I guess, Caroline, it probably also, and especially if we're thinking about confidence, also is part of your point earlier about wanting to be able to do 100% of a job description before you apply for the role, as opposed to, 50 or 80%. And I guess in a way that men might look at that differently. I guess that's all part of the same question.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I've battled this in my career, so I don't think that I'm here because I every job I've gone for, you look at it and you read it over and over again, and you just think there's this bit, and it niggles at you, and it can get you down in an interview. Now, how have I overcome that? I have overcome that by learning to look at the positives. Okay, so when I look at a person's spec, what are the things I can do and do really well? Those are the things I'm going to put on my supporting statements. Those are the things I'm going to show. Remember, the interview process is your best foot forward, nothing else. It doesn't really matter about the things that you cannot do well. What matters is the things that you can do well. And I'm really terrible at lying. So when I get in there, if they ask me a question and I know that it's not within my comfort area, you just say up front, this is the I have never done this before. I don't know what it's like. However, I've got this skill set, which means I can learn this. And I'm a quick learner and I can turn it into something else. But really, if you ask me to do it today, I probably never have a clue. And it usually makes the panel laugh. I haven't got a clue what you're asking because I've never done it. And that's the truth. However, when I look at this job, there's so much I can bring to it. There's so much I've done. This is my experience. These are the things I can bring to it. So it's about focusing on what you can do. There are very few people who go into an interview knowing they can do 100%. Let's be honest with ourselves. However, as a woman, somehow, I can't get this out of my mind. I did it with this job. I kept looking at it thinking, should I go for it? Should I not? Should I? Maybe not. Maybe no. I'm not quite ready. What? And then David Ragg said to me, the only thing standing between you and that job is having the confidence to attend that interview. There's nothing else, Caroline. If you ask me if you're ready, I would employ you in that role in a heartbeat. So I'm telling you, the only thing standing between that job and you and yourself is you. So you make that decision. Go to bed, sleep on it, and let's have a conversation in the morning. And after that pep talk, I think I soon saw the light today and decided he's probably right. It's just my own fears rather than anything else. So,
yeah. So just taking it beyond then the job. So when I've got jobs in the past and got over the shock that I've got the job, it's then going into then, oh goodness, can I actually do the job? And then you start the job, and then increasingly as your reference points of successes grow, or indeed where you do something and you think back and think, I won't do it like that again, it means that you've got the opportunity then to kind of enhance. I try and do reflective practice, because there are days that we all have days that, you think, goodness, I don't know how I'm going to get through today, because actually today I've really bitten off more than I can chew here. And somehow you get to the end of the day and try and think, right, okay, I did get through the day. I did achieve the things that I wanted to. We've made a difference here. We've moved a step forward there. And I think this is where I think that the coach is a really important part of how we grow. One of my past coaches encouraged me to read a book by Susan Jeffers, which is called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And it's a book that I've read a couple of times now. and I've recommended for people to read, because actually it just reminds you, what's the worst that could happen, and actually you can take risks and be successful. So sadly, if anyone does know how to shed imposter syndrome, that would be amazing. But I do think as time goes on, your reference points of actually I can do this, and it's just reminding yourself that you can be just as successful as the next person. So yeah, definitely.
Also, I've worked with a lot of male clients and candidates who experience imposter syndrome as well. I just wonder if they maybe mask it differently or very rarely admit it. But I have sometimes managed to tease it out of them. So it's not something
I think it's the former.
There's some good questions coming through on the Q&A feed as well. So perhaps if I can drop into one of them. I'm trying to work out which one's better. Yeah, can I ask this question? It's actually the first one that came through in the Q&A. Has networking been a major enabler in your progression, or has it just been a case of apply for it, see a job and then apply? How important is networking to get where you are? And is that something that, again, perhaps because there's more men in these senior roles in the East of England patch, it's easier for men to get on that networking journey, if you see what I mean? And perhaps that's another factor that's held women back thus far.
I think it's a combination of both. I wouldn't say, I mean, when I went to Lewisham, I sort of woke up one day and decided it was time for a change. And I sort of saw the job on a Sunday, and the deadline was Sunday night. I applied for it hurriedly, didn't think that I would be shortlisted because of such a hurried job. And Monday morning, I got a call from the agency. Before I knew it, Monday evening, I was sitting there writing a sporting statement. Few weeks, I was in an interview, and then I got home 2 minutes after I walked through the door, I get a call. I've got the job. I did not use any network. I literally saw the job. It was an associate director role. I saw it on NHS Jobs and applied for it and got it. However, if you have a mentor, I have a mentor stroke sponsor in Ann Johnson. What they do is they actively look for roles. They look out for opportunities for you. So I would probably not have seen the RNOH job advertised because I wasn't looking. I was very happy and content where I was, and I wasn't looking until she brought it to my attention, actually. It was that role and I think another role in Imperial. So she brought a number of roles to my attention and asked if I'd be interested. So I've done it both ways, and I think both ways work depending on what it is. But I've had opportunities where my mentor sponsor has pointed me in the direction of a job and I've gone for it and got it. And I've had ones that I've found myself and just applied for and got as well.
Yeah, I think it does depend on your character. So I'm an I, so networking for me is probably my worst nightmare. So I very much have trusted people that I've grown to know over the years. And it's actually probably over the years, I didn't know at the time that I actually had people that had probably spotted something in me that I hadn't even spotted myself. So when I'd applied for jobs, there were actually people that championed me, and it's only later years that I found out that they had put their neck on the line for me to do jobs. So I think some of it is just trusting that actually you work hard, you do what you think is the right thing, and then as you progress, and obviously we're talking more senior roles, DOF roles, I think you do need to use those formal networking arrangements, but it's the bit that I struggle with is the actual selling yourself, because you have to talk positively about yourself. So in prepping for my DOF roles going into provider, you know, I did have to make myself known to the chief executive, to the audit committee chair, to the chairman, to the finance committee chair. And actually, you know, I look back and I think the legwork that I did, even just to kind of get to the interviews, that was before even the interview. And yes, I did lean on my coach during those times, because you kind of need that, you know, that confidence boost. But also, it's just trying to plan it, and you don't, you know, I think sadly the world we are in, you don't just get opportunities that fall at your feet. You have to work to get the opportunities the more senior you get to, and you have to plan it, and then obviously it doesn't always come out with a successful ending, but you take that learning into your next application. I fear that probably for some of our male colleagues, it's probably because those networks are a bit more prevalent, in a way that perhaps we, you know, that's not how we work. And therefore, I do think that prep bit is quite important. But you just don't want to believe it, but you see it in front of your eyes. Then you see the way in which, you know, there's that dominance of connection that actually, you know, that's just not how we work. And I think that's the bit that's hard, because you then got to really make that extra effort in that preparation, so that when you come to the actual interview, you know, it is the final bit. It's not actually that the moment that you get the job, the decision probably has already been made, which is quite difficult.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I feel, I can't say if it's for sure in the east of England, but things are changing in some of the campaigns I've been involved in more recently. The clients wanted to make sure they were appointing the person that was the best for the role, rather than so-and-so because they were a good lad, or a nice guy, or she's a great girl. You know, they were really, really thorough in making sure that they had made the right appointment. But another question, slightly different tack, but it came up on the chat earlier. I thought it was a really good point. Does the panel think that there is a solid enough support network for new CFOs or aspiring CFOs? So I guess a lot of what we've discussed up until this point has been like, how do you get there? How do you overcome the imposter syndrome? How do you get a coach, a mentor, etc.? But then what happens if you are in this position? And just to say as well, we've not got a great deal of time left. It's gone very quick.
Yeah.
Already 5:54. But I'd be interested to hear your views.
In London, certainly, I don't think there is enough of a support network. That's why we are consciously working on having a support network. We've created a deputies network recently to allow us to know. You'll be surprised. Neighbouring trusts don't know who the deputy is in the next trust, so we don't know each other. So how are CFOs going to know who the deputies are? How are CFOs going to be cited on who's in the pipeline? It's almost like it's an unspoken thing. Nobody really knows. So we've started doing some of that work, and I think if you don't have it already in East of England, it will be a powerful network to create. One of the things we're also looking at, and we've looked at having an all finance event, series of events, and of course COVID's gotten in the way, where we actually provide a networking opportunity across all the bands, because we need to expose our people more. How we've taken it forward now is at STP level, trying to create the networks at STP level. Because what we're finding is people tend to work within areas where they live, unless you're like me, where I live almost 2 hours away from where I work. Most people live local and they want to stay local. There's several organizations there, and therefore that network we can get going to make sure that if people can actually tap on other organizations for roles and go there and develop comebacks or comment opportunities. So we're looking at all of that piece under the London Talent and Diversity Board to help create that, because as a deputy, coming from being a deputy just a few months ago, I wouldn't say there was that network. There's that Aspiring Directors Program, but to get on that is quite challenging. So if you don't go on something like that, it's almost like you're left on your own to fend for yourself. So I think if there is a more structured networking opportunity for people, it will help. However, I also think that you shouldn't sit there and wait for the formal networks. You should start building your own network and try to meet people, try to create that, at HFMA conferences, try and meet people, try and socialize. That people will come to these conferences and just keep to themselves, say to themselves, that's me personified. But lately, just like Dawn, I've found out that these networks are so important and I've taken them for granted for so long.
Yeah, I definitely think that there's some stuff that HFMA can do. I think Eastern Region have certainly, since the new arrangements, I think kind of really started to establish some helpful networks and to kind of the directors of finance and the deputies conversations. But obviously with COVID, that's kind of stopped. I think the face-to-face interaction is quite important, and it's quite, it's such a revelation with some of the technology changes we've experienced over the last few months, but actually the absence of that kind of human connection does make it quite difficult sometimes for people to get to know each other from quite wide ranging geographies. So I think that does need to be looked at. I think HFMA conferences and networking events should be used. But also when there are kind of planned events, such as if they're part of the Health Education England training programs, they do develop action learning sets and things like that. So I do wonder as well if there's a little bit more about how we can use some of those types of tools for problem solving, which also helps some of those networks as well. Because again, it kind of kills two birds with one stone. You're getting to know people, but also some of those tricky challenges that sometimes people, don't know who to reach out and, just share those thoughts or queries with. Action learning sets another tool of way of doing that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think we've got loads more questions that we probably don't have time to deal with today, so we need to pass on quite a lot of them, I think, to the next one that we do, Zoe.
Yeah, great. So I'll just spend a minute wrapping up and talking about next steps, if that's okay. So I think we've had a great discussion. There's been some great questions, and I'm so encouraged by the enthusiasm of the panel, but of everyone and everyone's questions. It's been brilliant. Thank you. And I guess it was predictable that an hour wouldn't be enough. Just some of the things that in terms of summarising, that I've definitely picked up from the conversations that we've had. So it's felt like a really positive atmosphere and a really positive discussion that we've had. It's been inspiring for me, and I hope it has for others. Really strong messages about being yourself, about not taking the negatives with you and focusing on the positives, and that there's not always a clear path, and that we need to embrace the unexpected at times, which we've definitely seen over the last few months, but which we will always see in the future. And then very clear message about the importance of networks. And I think that's just a really good place to stop and talk about the next steps for this network and the creation of this network. So what we're proposing to do is to set up an email forum of everyone who's joined today, to share a recording of the webinar today, and also to pick up the questions that we haven't been able to answer, and also to set that up so we can share thoughts and discussion and tips and network with each other, and have a safe space where we can arrange to have maybe a Teams meeting or a face-to-face meeting with those that we want to. So we'll set that up following this webinar today. I'd also like to ask you all to hold the 8th of September in your diaries. So the next webinar will be between 5 and 6 on the 8th of September. And we've got Anne Radmore, the Regional Director for the East England Regional Team on the panel for that day. And then finally, to wrap up, I'd like to say some thank yous. So a massive thank you today to Caroline and Dawn for coming along, for being so frank and honest and open and willing to share your experiences and your thoughts on this. It's been incredibly helpful. Thank you. Thank you for Nicola for organising. And also thank you for everyone who's participated. So without your questions and your input and you being here, we wouldn't be able to start this network off. So I'm incredibly grateful for all of you. So thank you all very much for your time. I look forward to our email forum and our chats, and I look forward to reconvening this webinar in the beginning of September.
Thank you.
Thanks, Zoe. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.